Hey there, everybody. Welcome to another edition of What's Hot with Sea of Tranquility. I'm your host, Pete Pardo, publisher and CEO of SOT. Today is Friday, June the 1st. June already. Technically almost summer, right? Or at least if you're here on the East Coast of the United States, it feels like summer. Well, it's technically not. We went from like winter to summer, not much of a spring. But anyway, as we are ushering in the warmer weather, of course, lots of great new releases are coming out. I've got a stack of them here to talk about today. The first two I'm going to talk about are going to be kind of like our co-headliners of today. They're both on Nuclear Blast Records, both pretty notable releases from bands who we haven't heard from in a while. The first one I think is a little bit more important, so to speak, at least for me, as it's a band who were kind of like darlings of the retro 70s hard rock style of bands out of Sweden who were pretty damn popular and then inexplicably just kind of broke up and disappeared. Well, they're back a few short years later. They weren't gone for too long. They've regrouped, reunion for an album called Peace, which is hot off the presses, just came out. So how's the album? I'm still digesting it, actually. Only 2 or 3 listens into it. And I like it a lot. It's typical Graveyard. Not a lot of surprises here. I think a little heavier than their last album, which came out a few years back, which was really kind of real bluesy and more in a classic rock style. This is a little more like their earlier material, although that kind of doomy aspect that they had on their first 2 albums, I think those days are kind of sailed. But I really dig this a lot. It's good, gritty guitar work, really good vocals. What I like about Graveyard is that they really don't sound like anybody else. Some of the other Swedish bands kind of, they take their cue from Zeppelin or Sabbath or the Stones or Grand Funk Railroad or that sort of thing. And I think Graveyard, while you hear little influences here and there, they've got a really unique style. And I commend them for that. So I'm still digging into this, but so far, first couple listens, Peace is very, very solid. Like it a lot. Okay, the other return is from a Norwegian band who, I believe it's 8 years? 8 years? 8 years since their last album. These guys rode pretty high throughout their, inception back in the early, mid-90s. They were one of that kind of second wave of Norwegian black metal bands. And they really developed a kind of cool style. They really were kind of the trailblazers, so to speak, as far as like on a commercially successful level of that symphonic black metal style with big orchestral synthesizer and keyboard arrangements and of course the black metal vocals and the blast beats and the tremolo pick thunderous guitar riffs and what have you, and had a string of really, really successful and popular albums. And then about 8 years ago they put out an album which probably was their least successful in the eyes of the fans and the critics, and then they kind of like disappeared for a while. So they've been working on a new album for over the last bunch of years, and it's finally here. It's called Eonian. Of course, I'm talking about Dimmu Borgir. Got to have some kind of scenes like this, right, for a chilling, frostbitten Norwegian black metal album. So how is the album? I actually like it. So far, I don't love it. And I think the reason why I don't love it is that I read a bunch of other website reviews of this in the days before I did this and before I reviewed the album on our website. And there are some writers who are claiming this a return to the traditional black metal style that Dimmu Borgir forged back 20 some odd years ago. And others are saying it's a perfect balance between the black metal and the symphonic stuff. And so I played it a couple times, and it's very well done. The arrangements are pretty spectacular, but it's not a black metal album for the most part. Yeah, there are black metal elements, of course, sprinkled throughout all the songs. But for the most part, this is just a really bombastic, well-done, epic-sounding symphonic metal album is what it is. Basically, if you take out the vocals, take out Shagrat's vocals, and drop in any symphonic power metal vocalist from, Epica, Nightwish, whoever, and you really wouldn't lose a step, and you'd be hard-pressed to think it was Dimmu. Yes, there are blast beats throughout the album. Yes, there are some raging guitar riffs, but this album is all about those kind of epic song arrangements and the keyboards and the sweep. It's just like a film score. There's some melodic vocals on here, but yeah, Shagrat's vocal, growly, raspy vocals are excellent as always. And like I said, it's a good album. If you come to it with that mindset that that's the type of album this. If you're expecting this to be a return to some of those furious albums they released in the early 90s or late 90s, early 2000s, you're not going to get that here. But as far as like a very orchestral, symphonic, bombastic metal album with black metal elements, pretty damn good. So I guess you'll be the judge. Like I said, I like this. I do. But if you're expecting a triumphant return to some of their earlier style material, I think you're going to be a little disappointed. But as a well-constructed symphonic metal album, like I said, with black metal elements, damn good. Damn good. Okay, switching gears a little bit. So one of the busiest musicians / guitar players / songwriters / vocalists on the planet over the last, decade and a little bit more. And like I said, a damn good guitar player. I dig him a lot. I know he's got his critics out there, obviously, but I personally really like this guy a lot. Talking about Joe Bonamassa, he's got a new live album out called British Blues Explosion Live. Basically, he played a concert, him and this really hot band played a concert in 2016 in England, where he kind of played tribute to some of the original British blues guitar players who obviously also went into rock, mainly Jeff Beck, Eric Clapton, Jimmy Page. Not sure why he left Peter Green out of that, but it's okay. Anyway, basically what you have here are a bunch of cover tunes, Joe and his band. So you've got a bunch of early tunes from the Jeff Beck group. You've got a couple of Zeppelin tunes, and the majority, though, are Clapton tunes or tunes that Clapton played on from his days of the Blues Breakers and Cream, as well as some of the solo stuff. But what do we got here? The Jeff Beck stuff is pretty damn spectacular. Beck's Bolero, Rice Pudding, Boogie with Stew. What else? Plinth, Water Down the Drain, Spanish Boots. You've got, what else is here? Boogie with Stew from Zeppelin. T for One / I Can't Quit You Baby. Pretty lengthy How Many More Times with a Anton Fig drum solo. Some Clapton stuff here. A couple surprises. I would not have expected him to do Pretending, which was one of his late 80s hits. Good song, but I think he could have found better stuff. I would have liked to hear like maybe a Blind Faith tune or some more Cream stuff, but I guess he wanted to really get a wide variety of Clapton stuff. He's also got some stuff from his early 70s solo albums, and you got Swalabra from Cream. What else? Motherless Children, Double Crossing Time, Let Me Love You Baby. A really good album. Blistering Bonamassa guitar solos, obviously. The band is just spot on. The production's great. It's a really great live album. One of the things, and I mentioned this in my review on the website, Bonamassa releases like a new live album, it seems like almost every year, but kudos to him because he doesn't release the same live album over and over. Every live album's got different songs on it. So it's not like you're getting every year or two the same tunes over and over and over again. So whether he's doing all original stuff or covers, blues covers, rock covers, whatever, he keeps the variety pumping and he keeps you guessing what's going to be on that latest live album. And you're not going to get the same one you got last year or 2 years ago or 5 years ago. So kudos for that. Good live album. I believe it's also on Blu-ray and DVD as well. I think LP too. So staying on the Bonamassa thing. So this album's been out for a couple months actually, but only getting it recently. It's called Black Coffee by Joe Bonamassa and Beth Hart. This is their third release together. Beth Hart, as many of you might know, is probably one of the most underrated female blues, pop, and rock vocalists on the planet. She's got a style that, I guess if you're going to compare her to anything, she's kind of a little Janis Joplin-ish, but she's just oozes sexuality, and she just can do the belt-out rock tunes, do like soft jazz as well as great pop. Here she's teaming up with Bonamassa again for their third outing, like I said. I think this is probably the best one they've done yet. It's got a nice mix of stuff, some rock tunes, some nice blues pieces, as well as some cool jazz and pop stuff. Just a really well-rounded, great album that showcases both the vocals of Hart and the guitar skills of Bonamassa. Nice, nice stuff. Okay, U.S. veteran, I'm going to call them veterans because they've been around for almost 20 years, stoner / psych act Moss Generator, Shadowlands, their brand new album on Listenable Records. You see that there? Oh, lots of glare, lots of glare, lots of glare. Anyway, Another very strong album from them. These guys have just been pumping out solid album after solid album, kind of quietly now, like I said, for almost 20 years. I like this one a lot. This one, a little bit different than the last couple they put out. I think the band are trying, a little bit anyway, to move a little away from some of the Sabbathisms that have permeated their prior albums. This one has got a little straight rock and roll in some tunes. I sense I hear a little Grand Funk Railroad, maybe a little Humble Pie. So they're trying to not just assault you with nonstop stoner rock stuff. There's a little bit of psych. There's some cool classic rock and blues rock on here. But it's still a pretty rocking album, pretty heavy in spots. Just a little, to my ears anyway, a little more accessible. And that's not a bad thing. So a lot of really great tunes. Highly recommend Moss Generator if you've never checked them out. All right. One of my favorite local New York bands over the last, 5-6 years or so, is a band from Brooklyn called The Golden Grass. Their latest is called Absolutely. Absolutely a great album. I've been a big fan of these guys. I know if you've been reading my reviews on SOT and on this YouTube channel, you've heard me talk about them numerous times. They are a really fun, kick-ass power trio who don't bother hiding their love for Grand Funk Railroad and Mountain and Zeppelin and a little bit of Sabbath and the Stones. And their music is just so exciting, full of heavy grooves and great classic rock, blues rock, and little bits of stoner riffs. Great vocals. These are songs to get up, move your body around, drink a beer, flip some stuff on the barbecue, and just tap your toe and bang your head a bit. Really, really good stuff. 8 tunes, all really awesome to listen to. A really fun, enjoyable album. They are also on Listenable Records, by the way, who's been putting out a lot of good stuff. So if you have not checked out The Golden Grass from Brooklyn, please do so. I don't think you'll be disappointed. They've got a couple albums out. This is a good place to start as any. Also from Brooklyn, New York, another great, great band called Sanhedrin, A Funeral for the World. Killer female vocals. Music that's it's classic metal with a touch of the new wave of British heavy metal style. Little bits of doom. Really cool riffs. This is just like out of a time machine from like 1982 or 83. Really, really good stuff. I dig this a lot. There's the band right there. Again, also a trio. Okay. Bass player, she also sings. Excellent guitar riffs. Solid drumming. A really good album, and these guys were just signed to Cruz del Sur Records. That's going to help them quite a bit. I believe they also opened up for Satan in New York City a couple years back, if I'm not mistaken. But a really, really good album that I urge you to seek out. All right, we're going to go over to the UK now for a band. This is my first experience with the band, but I liked it a lot. Prometheum, Faces of War. These guys are interesting. They're kind of tough to categorize. Bits of power metal, not quite extreme metal, but not too far from it. Little bits of thrash, classic metal, a little bit of Pantera-ish stuff. So I think their influences range from Pantera, Metallica, Megadeth, Judas Priest, so on and so forth. I dig it. It's definitely different sounding. This is not your run-of-the-mill thrash album, not your run-of-the-mill groove metal album, not your run-of-the-mill classic metal album. It combines a little bit of everything. Some really, really strong tunes on here. I think if you're in the mood to hear something a little bit different and you like different forms of metal, check these guys out because they do a little bit of everything, which is kind of nice. Okay, shooting back over here again. The latest release from the Hillmen, the Whiskey Mountain Sessions Volume 2. So this is a very interesting and fun album. If you love 70s jazz fusion, okay, you really should check these guys out. This is basically, who do we got here? So Peter Hillman, Gail Elliott from Jam Carrey, Lito Magana Jr., and Jeff Smith, who basically go into the studio and improvise, and this is what comes out. So you've got only 3 tracks on here. It's about 40 minutes long, one 20-minute long tune, another 10, another about 9. And it's just got awesome like electric piano and synth and biting guitar leads and cool rhythms. Trying to think of what it reminds me of. I think in my review on the website I stated a little bit of Fish, a little bit of maybe Chick Corea, maybe a little bit of Herbie Hancock. And I'm talking about like the 70s type of stuff, a little Jan Hammer. So if you really like that kind of atmospheric jazz fusion stuff that was pretty popular in the mid-late 70s, or the early mid-70s, I should say, I think you'll dig this. Kind of jammy. It's a little unstructured, but it's still kind of fun. When you listen to this through and through, and then you read how it was just complete improvisations, you'd be kind of surprised because some of it sounds like they had planned this out a little bit. That just goes to show you the top-notchness of the players that are involved. So that's a good one. Okay, here we have Hollow Earth out of Atlantis. This is a cool band. My first experience with these guys. They are they a trio? I believe they're a trio. Yeah, they're a trio who obviously have a love for 70s prog and psych and hard rock. Little bits of very early Deep Purple on here, a little bit of Caravan, maybe a little King Crimson. Okay, touch of Moody Blues in spots. I dig it. Cool guitar solos, a wealth of different keyboard sounds, psych-influenced vocals, Hammond organ. Yeah, good stuff. This is a band, and one thing I do want to point out, I hear a little bit of Ghost in their music as well. Maybe it's from the vocals, I think some of the arrangements too. So what they're trying to do, whereas Ghost comes from more of like a metal background, these guys are kind of doing a little bit of what Ghost is doing, but they're more coming from a progressive rock and psych background. Okay, but I think their music has that certain appeal to it. So check this out, Hollow Earth out of Atlantis. Very, very strong. Back over to the UK. Band I've never heard of before, but man, am I going to be looking out for them after this. The band is called Hex. Invicta is the album. Very, very strong, melodic, progressive metal and progressive rock. A really good band. If you love blistering guitar solos and guitar riffs and a lot of keyboards and upper register vocals, guy kind of sounds like a Bruce Dickinson on steroids, with just some really great arrangements and memorable hooks. This is a very, very strong album. I love when you get surprised by stuff like this, bands you never heard of before that just all of a sudden it shows up in your mailbox and you put it on, you're like, whoa, very professional sounding. Like I said, memorable songs, really cool arrangements. If you just love very, very hook-laden progressive metal with great guitar and keyboard work and exceptional vocals, be on the lookout for this. Hex Invicta. Okay, some veterans, all right? David Cross and David Jackson, Another Day. Who are David Cross and David Jackson, you ask? Well, you should be asking, but in case you are, David Cross, ex-violinist and mellotron player from King Crimson. We're talking back in the early mid-70s era. Red, Larks, Tongues, and Aspics. Bible, that era. As well as David Jackson, sax player from Van de Graaff Generator, also from their classic era from the 70s. So they have gotten together to do an album together, and it's actually really damn good. There's the back of the album. I wouldn't necessarily call it a prog album. It's more of like a jazz and jazz fusion album with prog references, but they've got a bunch of other players on here. So David Cross on electric violin and keyboards, David Jackson on flute, sax, keyboards, and sound beams, Mick Paul on bass, Craig Blundell on drums. No guitar to be found. You don't miss it because you've got a lot of leads from the violin and the sax, and it's just a really, really classy album by two near legendary performers. Why not get together and do something? And I'm glad they did. Let's hope that this is not the last that we hear from this duo. It's really, really strong, majestic type music. Again, more in a jazz sort of way, but very, very good. If you're a fan of either of those two musicians or the bands they came from, definitely investigate that. Okay. So here we have a 2-disc set from Tangerine Dream. This is called, oh my God, hold on a second. Got to pull out the glasses, folks. Quantum Gate plus Quantum Key. Okay. So basically what Edgar Froese, founding member, legendary man of Tangerine Dream, one of the most important musicians on the electronic music scene over the last 50 years. So he died a couple of years ago. But he, as he knew he was on the way out, he basically told the band that he wanted them to continue after he had passed on. He even brought a replacement into the band. They were working on the Quantum Gate album. They finished it when he passed. So this is a re-release of that album, as well as the Quantum Key EP, which they put together shortly thereafter. So now you got them both on one. If you love Tangerine Dream, not a hell of a lot different than what they've been doing for the last 20 years or so. Just really, really cool electronic music, littered with synths and sequencers and all that kind of stuff. Really good meditative music. Tangerine Dream, again, one of those bands that you could arguably say they've been putting out the same album or similar albums for a million years, but none of them are bad. You put these albums on, you're like, I get it. If you don't like synthesizer type music, maybe bored to tears here. But if you can appreciate this type of stuff, this is very solid. Really, any album they've ever put out is really, really cool. Granted, the stuff they've been releasing over the last 20, 30 years, very different from what they put out in the 70s, which was really dark and kind of menacing, even though it was in the similar style. Different times, different equipment, different instruments, that sort of thing. But a really, really good album released on, K-Scope Records. Okay, over on from our good folks at Purple Pyramid / Cherry Red. We've got, not Cherry Red, sorry, Cleopatra, my mistake. Guitar Masters Collection. Here's a collection of mostly instrumental tunes produced and compiled by Brian Tarkin, who also plays some guitar, producer extraordinaire. We've got here a collection of tunes, like I said, mostly instrumental, a couple have vocals, featuring a plethora of legendary guitar players. You got 2 songs on here from the late Alan Holdsworth, along with bassist David Hines. You've got a tune with the late Larry Coryell, along with Brian Tarkin on guitar. You've got a tune with Steve Vai and Randy Coven. Randy Coven, bass player extraordinaire. Vai, of course, we know who he is. We've got another song with Zakk Wylde, as well as Randy Coven. We've got a tune with Stanley Clarke, with Joe Satriani. One with Chris Poland and Tarkin. We've got another one with Stanley Clarke and Satriani. One with Hal Lindes on acoustic guitar. And then finally, a cover of Blue Wind, obviously a Jeff Beck tune, with Billy Sheehan, Doug Doppler, and Brian Tarkin. Really solid. If you're into guitar music, guitar-oriented music, can't go wrong with this collection. Would have been nice to have a picture of a guitar on the front, but we got the amp on the front and the Les Paul on the back. But it's a sizzling collection of mostly instrumental tunes that I think any guitar player or lover of guitar music will appreciate. Get it just for the 2 Alan Holdsworth tunes. It's worth the price of admission just for those alone. Okay, here is something that I'm sure most folks would have liked to see, have been wanting to see for years and years and years. These recordings have been out there on the bootleg scene for a million years. Talking about The Who live at the Fillmore East 1968. 2-disc set. This is pretty happening. So this is just prior to Tommy, so keep that in mind. So we've got a pretty raucous, energetic Who performance. What do we got in here? Summertime Blues, Fortune Teller, Tattoo, Little Billy, I Can't Explain, Happy Jack, Relax, I'm a Boy, a quick one while he's away, My Way, Come On Everybody, Shaking All Over, and Boris the Spider. And then on disc 2, a gargantuan 33-minute long My Generation, with the Who just jamming and going off into all sorts of weird musical territory and then destroying everything at the end. It's pretty damn cool. If you're into like the Who recordings from the early years where they were obviously not the huge band they later became, but still doing lots of really, really cool stuff and breaking a lot of barriers on the rock scene, this is magical, and it's from the Fillmore East. How many great live recordings do we have from the Fillmore East, for crying out loud? It's just a magical place that magic happened, right? All right, my last new release of the day is from our friends at Esoteric Recordings. Chris Squire's Fish Out of Water. Remixed, remastered. There's multiple versions of this. There's one that comes with the LP and the remaster and remix on, I believe, a Blu-ray or DVD, blah, blah, blah. I've got the 2 CD version. So disc 1 is the new stereo mix of the original album. It's damn good. Sounds great. This is probably arguably, in my opinion anyway, the best solo album released by a member or ex-member of Yes ever. No offense to Rick Wakeman, because I know he's got a couple that are probably right underneath this one. For me, anyway. I know I'm gonna get some of you out there who are gonna be like, no way, Wakeman's is better. Whatever. But I think that this is the best solo album from a Yes member. It's just so Yes-like. Basically just take out guitars. There's some 12-string guitar work on here occasionally, but take out like the Steve Howe equation. It's basically a Yes album. Some great tunes on here, and it just shows you how great a singer Chris Squire was. You could easily drop in John Anderson on any of these songs and add in maybe a little guitar from Howe, and you've got this amazing, amazing Yes album. Great tunes on here. Hold Out Your Hand, You By My Side, Silently Falling, Lucky 7, and of course Safe. Top to bottom, it's great. It's kind of jazzy in spots. We got Mel Collins on here on saxophone. Bill Bruford's on drums. It's a really good supporting cast. You got an orchestra playing on a couple tunes. Side 2, you've got the disc 2. You've got the original stereo mix remastered. Okay, along with a couple bonus tracks. You got like single mixes of 2 of the tunes, and then you've got 2 tunes from the Run with the Fox and Return of the Fox, that little project that Squire and Alan White did in 1980 or it was 81, and that's kind of cool as an inclusion here. But I think the remix of the original album is well worth hearing. It's real bright and punchy, and the clarity is just amazing on it. So a nice reissue here, and then you got this great booklet, which has all sorts of information and photographs on the album. You can't, Esoteric Records and all the folks at Cherry Red, you just can't go wrong with the stuff that they pump out, right? It's amazing stuff. Anyway, our last bit of business here on this near half-hour version of What's Hot. Forgotten favorites, right? So I may get a little flack for this one, and I'll give you the reason why I'm going to talk about this one today. So I've been on a little bit of a Boston kick, as you can see lately. Nothing wrong with that, right? And listened to the first 3 albums, especially, quite a bit. But I pulled this one out last night, and this album is actually a lot better than I remember it, and it's a lot better than a lot of people give it credit for. I'm talking about Walk On, the 1994 album from Boston. Yeah, it doesn't have Brad Delp on it, I know. But it's a really good album. There's some really good rockin' tunes on here. You've got, who is it? Frank Cosmo does most of the lead vocals. And, of course, he was with Barry Goudreau in Orion the Hunter and then hooked up with Boston later on. And he actually sings a lot like Brad Delp. But there's just some great tunes on here. I mean, the Walk On medley itself is just so epic and so, man, that could have come from the first or second Boston album. Just really good. Some really good tunes on here. Some cranking guitar. I don't know. I dig it. I dig it. Some of you are out there probably saying, anything after third stage is terrible. You may be right. But I like it. It's still, it's watered down Boston, but you got Tom Schultz there. And that's the important thing. So anyway, that's my forgotten favorite of the day. I know most people don't talk about this album at all, hardly. It's sitting up there on the shelf in my collection, and it was good to actually hear this for the first time in a long while. And I was like, wow, this album holds up a lot better than I originally thought it did. So anyway, that's my forgotten favorite of the day. Visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're here fairly often on the mighty YouTube. What do we got coming up, guys? A lot of you have been asking for a Yes show, History of Yes show. Going to do that. I think I'm also going to do my top concept albums, kind of a rant. That's going to be a fun one. I know I'm going to get a lot of feedback on that one, so that might actually be the next one. I'm also thinking of doing a show all about some of the best power trios in the history of rock. So lots of stuff we could do. So till then, be safe. Make sure you investigate all this new music. Lots of reviews on the website. Take care. See you next time.